touch of frost out of town. Further south, where we have more cloud around, they're not quite as cold. So we start Friday then off on a largely dry note across the northeast and the southwest. There will be those showers from the word go through central areas, and then as the temperatures begin to rise into the afternoon, showers will become more widespread. And again, we could see some heavy, maybe thundery ones, and they will be slow moving as the winds will be light too. 16 or 17 degrees in the southeast and double figure values in the north as well, so feeling a little bit warmer for all. Could see some rain affecting the Channel Islands, southern England through Friday night, but into the weekend it's high pressure building in gradually from the west, so that's going to settle things down, although there'll still be some showers around, particularly on Saturday. It will turn dry from Sunday onwards, and we'll start to see the blue colours ebbing away and see those orange and yellows move across our shores. So for the weekend, although it's going to be quite chilly to start with a few showers, it's likely to turn dry with increasing amounts of sunshine and gradually turning warmer, and it stays pretty dry and fairly warm as we head through next week as well. Good night.
Let's go, come on. Don't sweat, lads.
The hijack required a police insider.
Someone's pulling the strings.
If you've ever asked yourself why we do this job, this is it.
Take cover!
Line of Duty, the complete box set, exclusively on BBC iPlayer.
Having anxiety is probably one of the most lonely, most isolating things to have.
30 years ago, I'd had a period of psychosis and I lost my mind.
You can't stop your kind of feelings just spiralling downwards and downwards. Just this blackness.
We need to talk.
A series of powerful personal stories about mental health starts with Nadia, Anxiety and Me, Wednesday at 9 on BBC One.
Right now on BBC One, an hour of lively topical debate with Fiona Bruce.
Tonight we're in Northampton. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Amber Rudd, Home Secretary until her resignation last year over her handling of the Windrush scandal. She returned to the Cabinet in November as Work and Pensions Secretary. Labour's Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury and City Minister Jonathan Reynolds. Anna Soubry, a Conservative MP for 9 years. She left the party 2 months ago over its policy on Brexit and became a founding member of the pro-Remain party Change UK. Nigel Farage, an MEP for 20 years and a candidate in the upcoming elections, former leader of UKIP and now leader of the newly formed Brexit Party, and entrepreneur, Labour donor and founder of Labour Leave, John Mills. Welcome to our panel, to our audience here, and of course to you at home. You know this already, you can argue along using hashtag BBCQT on Facebook, on Instagram and on Twitter. Join in the conversation. And let's start with our first question tonight, which is from Julie Corley.
Hello. After a week of great comebacks, will Theresa May do the same in getting a Brexit deal through Parliament?
You're talking about the footy by any chance?
Maybe.
Can Theresa May do the same, Anna Soubry?
No, the numbers are not there for her, and she has no plan B, and that is the real problem. Look, we're in a real political crisis, and we are in a crisis because Parliament can't decide on the way forward. And one of the biggest problems we have is that people aren't being honest about why we're in this crisis and the way out of it. We're in this crisis because of Brexit, because of all the fake and phony promises that were made about how easy it would be, how good it would be. And whichever way you cut it, it's now arguable that you can't actually deliver it. And in whatever Brexit deal you put forward, even on the government's own assessments, is going to make our country poorer.
And do you think Theresa May has made false promises then?
I know Theresa's problem has been that she's put down these things called these red lines, which she has never been able to move away from. So you've got that problem, because there was a time in Parliament where we could have absolutely reached a compromise. We could have delivered on the referendum, we could have done the best for British business and maintained peace in Northern Ireland. That time was there. And Theresa absolutely refused to grasp it. I went to see her I made the case for the single market and the customs union, and she would not listen, she would not have it, even after she lost the Conservatives the majority. So it's now gone and it's moved on. And I believe that most people in this country are fed up to the back teeth with the whole thing. I think they look at both parties and they see them in a mess. And the only way out of it now, to do the right thing, is to take it back to the British people, to have that... Now, can I just say something? Can I just say something very gently to you? Can you just say something very gently to you, sir? I get very sad at the state of British politics when people can't have a point of view which you may not agree with, but they get shouted down and howled down. Let's have a proper, honest debate about the mess we are in and how are we going to get out of it.
Okay.
And we can only get out of it with a people's vote. And
Okay,
if
no,
people,
Anna, we've heard you.
People vote for her deal, that's it. Final say.
Anna, we've heard you. We've heard you. Sir, we'll come to you in a moment. Anna Rudd, you don't think Theresa May can get a deal through, do you?
Well, for that comeback to take place, it's going to be all about the numbers, which is what Anna was highlighting.
And do you think she can do it?
Yes, I think she can do it. I think she can do it, but it's not really... I mean, Theresa May has done the right thing. She has delivered a deal, as the people asked her to do, which protects businesses and jobs and is a good deal with the European Union. Now, unfortunately, it's been voted down. I voted for it 3 times. I'd like to vote for it again. I'd like to make sure it gets through this time.
She also threatened no deal until you and a few others persuaded her out of it.
The threat to no deal was a negotiating strategy with the European Union. No deal does not work for the UK. It's bad for its economy, it's bad for its security, and it's bad for the Union. But I believe she can make a comeback if only the people in Parliament, the members of Parliament, and that's Labour as well as Conservative, decide that the best outcome now is to get that compromise. Whatever sort of Brexit anybody here wants, anybody on the panel wants, democracy has different forms. There's the referendum and there's members of Parliament. We have to get a majority for the withdrawal agreement or we can't deliver on it. People don't like that, but it's a complex issue. We can get the numbers and get this through. We can deliver on leaving the European Union.
Young woman at the back.
Well, to be honest, I can't believe we're still having this debate. At this point in time, I think the only things left in Europe should be Liverpool and Tottenham. And I think, Anna, if you would like another referendum, why can't we use the EU elections as another referendum? And when the Brexit Party do well, which I hope they do, and that's coming from a Conservative Party member, I've been a member of the Conservative Party since I was 16. I'm now 19. I've canvassed for them, but the party has let us down. And I will be voting for the Brexit Party during the European elections. And that seems to me a democratic way of having a second referendum, which would be undemocratic.
I know you're putting this to Anna, but Amber, I just want to hear what you think of that.
But the point is, what is your answer to my point that whatever sort of Brexit you want, we have to get a majority of MPs for voting for it in the House of Commons. We have a House of Commons, we have members of Parliament, 34 Conservatives voted against it, so we're not able to deliver on it. Whatever you may choose to have as you think the best Brexit, it has to get through Parliament, because that's our law, that's legislation. If we can't get it through, we can't deliver it. So this is the only one we have a chance of getting through.
There's a lot of hands up. There's a lot. I'm just going to get around the audience a little bit. The man there in the yellow sweater.
I think it's a little bit hypocritical of people to say that we've had a vote, that's it, let's just move on with Brexit. The former Brexit Secretary, David Davis, he was quoted as saying that if democracy ceases to change its mind, then it's no longer a democracy. He was the one, and he was a Brexit secretary, and he said that. I think it's very hypocritical for people to say, no, you're no longer allowed to change your mind. 1.2 million people difference is not enough for me to make such a life-changing decision as Brexit and to leave the European Union. I don't think it's enough. A lot of people will not run their household that way. You know, if you have a family of 5, for example, 3 of them said, we want to move house, 2 of them said they don't want to move house. Would you call them undemocratic? No. You will listen to them. You will find out why. You try and find a resolution. It is reckless. You will not run your house that way. Why ask Theresa May to run the country like that?
Young man at the back. Just the young man at the back.
Yeah, Anna Soubry talks about campaigning a lot for a second referendum. I'm just wondering why the Change UK MPs are not standing by-elections in their constituency. Surely the circumstances have changed there.
I can answer that. Am I able to answer that question?
I was going to come on to that later, but since we're on it, why aren't you fielding a candidate in the Peterborough by-election?
My values and my principles and what I believe in has not changed at all. And let me just finish. Yeah. So sorry. Let me just explain. I have to tell you that my constituents, 3 to 1, in their communications and emails to me, have supported what I've done because they know that Britain's politics are broken.
No, but that's not the question, is it? The question is why aren't you fielding a candidate in the Peterborough by-election?
He didn't ask that question. Sorry, he asked me why I wasn't going to stand as a by-election.
Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. Sorry, I'll just ask your question again. I misunderstood it.
Yeah, so basically I asked whether Change UK MPs should now sit in by-elections because surely the circumstances have changed for their constituents. You know, Anna Soubry stood on a manifesto of the Conservative Party that said they'd delivered a referendum result. You're not doing that. You've changed to a different party. Now you want a second referendum. You should sit by elections because the circumstances have changed for your constituents.
That's not what my constituents are telling me, and my principles and my values have not changed. I tell you what my people in my constituency want. They want a people's vote. They are entitled to a final say, and they are entitled to change their minds. And young people are entitled to say
Let's get back to the question. Will Theresa May be able to get a Brexit deal through Parliament? What is going on in the talks between Labour and Conservatives and the government?
Well, to answer Julie's question, I think it's possible, but the Prime Minister
And are you going to help her do
change.
it?
Well, the Prime Minister has to understand the public don't want her deal, no matter how they voted in the referendum, and Parliament has rejected her deal. So she's got to be willing to change, and that's what the talks
And they haven't gone for any of your deals either, incidentally.
I voted for Remain, but I want a deal. I want to move on past this. I accept sometimes you are on the losing side and you have to do it. But I would say one of the reasons we are in an impasse is not just the ineptitude of the Prime Minister, though that is clearly one of the big factors. It is also because all of the claims from people like Nigel at the beginning of the referendum and through it, that we would get an easy deal because we bought a lot of German cars, they would give us a deal because there was a German election, the pressure would be on them. The honest truth is that hasn't happened. That wasn't correct. And to go from that to say, let's just take no deal, let's forget about
jobs... Hang on, but we're not talking about that, though. In fairness, what we're talking about is will Theresa May get a Brexit deal through Parliament? She's in discussions with Labour at the moment. Jeremy Corbyn has said this cannot be an indefinite process. Another Labour source has said, you're a million miles away.
Well,
the two of you. Where are you?
We are negotiating in good faith, but she's going to have to change some of those red lines. I'll be quite honest.
Presumably you're going to have to change too.
Well, we are willing to compromise, and I think most Labour MPs have, because the public voted for that in the referendum, and I think it's not dishonourable, Anna, to try and stick to that. We've tried to have anything that will break the impasse. We've tried to compromise, and I think that is the right thing to do. But frankly, the way things are going at the minute, if we're being honest, negotiating with the Conservative Party is like negotiating with a company that's going into administration. Every single day there's a new person running for the leadership of the Tory party, and until we get some certainty from their side that they would stick to a deal and be willing to compromise, it's clearly going to be difficult.
So do you think these talks are doomed
No, I think a lot of people want to move on. I think the majority of MPs do accept the result and want a deal and want a way to move forward. But the fact is, at the minute, from the Prime Minister's point of view, the government is very badly led.
It's very disappointing to hear Jonathan being so dismissive about these talks. This is the best way we've got of getting a reasonable Brexit through. We have to compromise. We're willing to compromise. I hope that Labour's willing to compromise.
What are you compromising on?
We're compromising on the actual type of Brexit we do, whether it's on the customs union. No, they are having those conversations.
So what is Theresa May telling you about the talks? Because you've talked in the past about the fact she likes to play her cards very close to her chest. What has she told you?
Well, the talks obviously are confidential, but I've spoken to people on both sides who are having those talks, and they're both...
Have you talked to her?
They're both... I've discussed it at Cabinet with her, that people have, as Jonathan said, entered into these in good faith. We have to get a majority of MPs in the House to support the deal in order to get one through. That means we have to reach out to Labour because 34 Conservatives voted against it.
This should have been done at the beginning, not at the end of the process.
Nigel Farage. Will Theresa May get a deal through? That was Julie's question.
Yeah, it was. Well, we've just heard from our political class in Westminster. We have a genuine...
Well, you're the political class too.
We have a genuine democratic crisis in this country, and the reason's simple. We voted to leave by quite a big majority in a referendum. We then voted a year later in a general election for two political parties who told us they would respect our wishes and carry out Brexit. We then saw 500 MPs vote for Article 50, which said we leave on the 29th of March with or without a withdrawal agreement. And the reason we didn't leave on March the 29th is these people do not want us to become an independent, self-governing nation. They are doing their utmost to thwart Brexit. And now it gets worse, because now, to try and save their own skins, we've got a Labour and Conservative Party negotiating a permanent customs union and alignment with single market rules. They're basically trying to make us associate members of the European Union with no say, with no rights, with continued ongoing cost, in many ways even worse than staying a member of the European Union. This is a coalition of Parliament against the people, and I pray that it does not go through, because it won't be Brexit.
Obviously, you describe a coalition of Parliament. They haven't actually agreed anything yet.
Well, they're trying.
John?
Well, I think that Nigel's analysis here is fairly accurate. I think the problem was that the result of the referendum was for leave. The Parliament that was elected in 2017 contained a large majority of people who were for Remain. And I understand what their point of view is, that that was the right thing for the country. But I think the trouble is that this was an anathema to a large number of people in the country, which is one of the reasons why we've got this disconnect between the kind of Westminster bubble and everybody else. And I think there are real dangers for the Labour Party in agreeing anything with the Conservatives, because I think that this would endorse the Conservative outcome, which I think has been a very poor one. And I think that the Labour Party has got real problems, not so much in the areas like London and other places where there's big Remain majorities, but in other parts of the country where you've got large numbers of traditional Labour voters, particularly in the Midlands and Wales and the north of England, who are flaking away from the Labour Party. And I think what really needs to be done now is not to go ahead with the existing agreement. I think we need to move on and try and find some other solution to this problem.
And what do you think that could be?
Well, I think actually the changes that need to be made are comparatively small. Really, the big sticking block is what's happening in Northern Ireland. If you do something about that, and maybe something about the £39 billion, then I think you probably would have a majority in Parliament. And I do think one of the real problems about this whole experience we've been through is that what's happened is that the whole Irish question has been blown up and blown up and blown up. Of course there are solutions to the Irish problem that could be implemented. There may be a little bit of smuggling left over. I'm sure well, there's always has been
there is now.
There won't be anything new.
There is today.
But to have the whole of the future of this country, and indeed to some extent of Europe, hung up on about 1% of British trade going across that Irish border.
It's not just about trade. Don't forget, a young journalist died very recently.
It is, but it's largely about trade. If you've got...
It's about peace. It's about the Good Friday Agreement that's delivered peace now for decades.
But David Trimble, who won a Nobel Prize for all this, doesn't think that's the case. I think it's an easy thing to say to try and wind everybody up, but I don't believe that... if you look at right across the piece, I don't believe that there should be an obstacle to getting some sort of agreement.
The young woman there in the blue.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how is it responsible to back a no-deal Brexit, considering the implications it can have on Northern Ireland and the political fragility over there at the moment?
Well, as you hear, John doesn't seem to feel it's that... Clearly, this is your policy.
Interestingly,
your only policy.
very interestingly, on that question of a WTO Brexit, that's something the European Parliament itself prepared for back in 2017 and published a report and explained exactly how the border would work. The issue is tariffs, all right? But...
No, it's not.
Given that now there isn't some little man, checking every lorry that goes across borders or container that comes into Felixstowe every day from China. This is all done online. That's very easy. The second question might be that of regulatory alignment. Would product specs be different? We've been in the European Union for 45 years. To begin with, there'd be no issue with that whatsoever. And isn't it funny how a WTO Brexit, the Taoiseach in Dublin has said there'd be no border put up. Monsieur Barnier has said there'd be
Nigel,
no border put up.
Can I just
the British government have said that no border would get put up.
No, wait a minute.
Unless Donald Trump's coming over to build a wall, you know,
This is not... The former head of the World Trade Organisation. So you'd think he'd know what he's talking about, Pascal Lamy, when he was talking with a Conservative...
Former European Commissioner.
And former European Commissioner.
Funny that, yeah.
Well...
Right, so
he was the head of the WTO, and he thought this idea of this kind of solution you're suggesting in Northern Ireland was for the birds.
Is Pascal Lamy suggesting a hard border?
He's suggesting that any other solution is not going to work.
Nobody is suggesting a hard border, and that's the point.
These are the lies and the spin.
Oh, right. Here we go. Here we go.
Why? Because Nigel Farage was criticising the return of our customs union and regulatory alignment. In 2015, he was arguing for exactly the same thing, saying that we could leave the European Union just like Norway had done, which is still a member of the single market. Like they left
Norway never joined. What are you talking about?
Because in 2015...
What are you talking about?
The lies that you told
I said no deal is better than a bad deal, Anna. I argued it all through the referendum, day after day after day. You clearly weren't listening. You never do you?
Can I just say... Wait a minute. Can I just say, you're talking about the toxicity of the debate and the kind of hot tempers we see here and the kind of stuff we've seen online and outside Parliament. Talking like this is exactly, surely, what we're talking about.
But people...
We can be better than that, can't we?
But you're right, Fiona, but in the referendum, people like Nigel said we would get a deal. He argued for that. He said...
I said no deal's better than a bad deal, Anna. Day after day after day.
No,
you weren't listening, were you?
Well, you can't listen to me because you can't let me finish a sentence.
Amber,
Amber Rhodes wants to come in. People were told we wouldn't leave unless a deal had been done. That's what we were promised. Like we were promised an extra £350 million a week on the bus for the NHS.
If I may just brief, the lady's question is absolutely right. No deal would be damaging, which is why it's so important to get a compromise here. The reason why MPs are finding it so difficult is that we can't just deal in short slogans, in three-word answers. We have to deal with the facts. Nigel can have his own views, he can't have his own facts. We have to look at the evidence and then we draw our conclusions, and the majority of the House of Commons have concluded that no deal would be
What about the country, Amber? What about... How do we deliver a democratic result? That's the point. It's perfectly clear. Every major player on both the Remain and Leave side, including you, said if we vote to leave, we are leaving the single market and leaving the customs union. Now, given that Mrs May's appalling deal
has
been...
Well,
it's the worst deal in history, in my view, but anyway, there we are.
No, it's not.
Given that it's been... The only way now... I would much rather... We'd had a better negotiation, but we haven't. Given where we are, to deliver the democratic result, the only way out of this is a WTO Brexit, and then we become an independent country, and the Brexit referendum has been delivered.
No, but...
there's no other way of delivering
Nigel, you are not the only person who can opine on what is Brexit and what is not Brexit.
Well, it's not customs union, is it?
You're elected to the European Union.
Is customs union membership Brexit?
Absolutely the right one. There's a no-deal Brexit is not about tariffs. That's a small part of it. Most of our economy is services. We lose access to the European Union if we don't sensibly negotiate what is in both our interests if we do that. It's also about... It's about the cost of sterling, which would crash if we leave without a deal. Your living standards will be affected. Nigel Farage won't be affected by that. He's done brilliantly out of Europe, and still, frankly, is. It's you who will be affected. I'm trying to negotiate a sensible way to honour that referendum result, but make sure people are protected, they can go on living their lives. That is not a dishonourable position to be in, and frankly, we need more sensible discussion like that, rather than what we're hearing tonight from Nigel.
Let's take another question. Graham Howard.
Would a change of Prime Minister break the current Brexit deadlock?
Well, I was going to ask you this, Amber. I mean, you've had a busy day today on the airwaves, in the press.
Have I?
Is this your bid?
No, it is not. And the answer to your question is no, not in my view, because, as I've said before, is that there is a difficulty in the House of Commons with getting a majority to agree to support the Brexit deal we have, or any version. Hence, the government reaching out to Labour to try and find the right compromise. The Prime Minister has said that she will leave after the first stage of Brexit is done. I think it would be a mistake to move against her now. This is a delicate time. We need to hold our nerve and try and get this deal done.
Even when you've got 80% of Conservative members saying they want her to resign.
Well,
it's a very difficult line to hold.
I'm not entirely convinced by that poll. People have different views.
That's a poll from Conservative Home.
I've seen certain type of people are supporters of Conservative Home, so it's not entirely what I'm hearing down in my constituency. She has committed to leaving, but this time we need to hold our nerve and make sure that we do deliver by having this agreement get through. I don't think it would change anything at the moment.
Well, we know she's going to go at some point. Do you think the next leader should be a Brexiteer?
I think the thing that matters most about the next leader is that they're going to deliver on strong Conservative values of making sure we have a strong economy, strong welfare state, support businesses. That's not going to be my priority when I look for who's the next leader. I want somebody who can deliver on the other things apart from Brexit, because I hope we'll have been able to deliver on the first stage, and then I'll be looking for somebody who's really going to support the country, support the welfare state, invest in businesses, and really take this country forward.
John, should Theresa May quit to break the deadlock?
I think she should. And I think
immediately?
Well, I think really as soon as possible. I think we need something to break the logjam, and getting a new leader of the Conservative Party would probably be the way of doing it.
And do you think anyone in the Conservative Party wants to inherit the deadlock right now?
I think they all do.
But right now, I'm not so sure.
Well, I think they'd love to be the leader. Obviously, they wouldn't like to have the problem. But I think there has to be a solution to the problem. I think it's going to be very difficult to find a solution to this problem which is going to go through Parliament unless there is some movement on the withdrawal agreement, including something about Northern Ireland. And I think we need somebody who is prepared to go to the European Union and tell them that. And I must say, my own personal view is that although I don't think that a no-deal exit is the right way to go, to be willing to say that if you can't get anything better than what we've got at the moment, that is worth looking at, seems to be the right way to go. Who ever does a deal unless they're prepared to walk away from it if it's really bad?
Exactly. Absolutely.
The man at the back in the white shirt.
I don't think the problem is who's in number 10. It's who's in Parliament. It's a subversion of democracy. Yes. And what I would like to see is Corbyn come out and put the case forward from the left to see how we leave the EU. He's too quiet. As a student of Tony Benn, he should put in his case forward and tell us what he really thinks.
Well, we'd all be quite interested in the answer to that question.
What is the answer to that question, Jonathan? Is Labour remain or leave?
Well, the majority of Labour MPs will remain, but most of us accepted the result, and we want to move on and get a deal to do that. But
so which is it? Which is it? Are you remain? Are you standing for remain or leave?
We're trying to get a leave deal. We're trying to get a position that moves the country forward and accepts the result of the referendum. But just to answer
so your own
that question,
MPs who say, I mean, you've got Andrew Adonis, for example, said only yesterday, only Labour can stop Brexit. Obviously, you've got Wes Streeting, who says we're a party of remain. The difficulty is I think that's the point the gentleman's making. So many of your own MPs don't seem to be sure.
Well, they're representing in the main the view in their own constituencies, and there's nothing unreasonable about that.
No, so how is that
just to answer that gentleman's question, the problem with the case for Brexit, the idea that Brexit will deliver goals of Brexit, I'm afraid it just doesn't add up, because the people who will suffer the most from that no-deal Brexit are people on the lowest incomes, some of the most vulnerable people, and that is why any Labour leader, including Germany, because of what we know, what has already happened in terms of the effect on the currency, the effect of prices rising, those are real factors.
OK, let's say, and of course West Street is calling for a second referendum.
60% of Labour seats voted leave. Your MPs are not representing their constituents. They're letting down their people even more than Tories.
They are trying to implement the deal that you promised and isn't available, and your mistake has led to this problem. If you had been proved right, we'd already have left.
My mistake was to believe that we should be an independent, self-governing nation. That's what Brexit. That's what we voted for. And it's what we want.
None of the things you promised have come
true. The young man there in the corner.
We have Tory MPs striking in solidarity with the perpetrators of the Bloody Sunday massacre. So how can we expect them to tread lightly and come up with a proper deal that actually respects Northern Ireland?
You're talking about the decision by Johnny Mercer, yes. The Tory MP, he announced today. Yes, the man in the yellow T-shirt.
I think all this talk about Brexit is absolutely meaningless. Until the general...
Well, we're talking about would changing the Prime Minister break the deadlock?
You were talking about Brexit as part of that. And until the general public takes control of central banking, the public are fodder. Mr Farage knows this, but he's done nothing about central banking. We will always be that. It doesn't matter if we're in it or out of the union.
The man there in the blue shirt.
I think there's a couple of problems here.
That's why he doesn't answer the question.
The fundamental problem, first of all, is, Nigel, you say the WTO rules, that's not a problem, that's the solution. Name me one country that is in the WTO rules that doesn't have a trade agreement with another country. Name me one country.
No, of course, because WTO rules are the basis from which you begin. Now, I believe the only way we can get a free trade deal with the European Union without the attached politics is first to leave,
Nigel,
and then they'll come running.
Sorry.
And by the way...
Just answer the question.
By the
Name me
way,
a country.
there are 24 countries. There are 24 countries. There are 24 countries.
Please don't shout out. Yes,
Can you just name me the
There
country?
are at least 24 major countries queuing up to do trade deals with us.
Can you name a country in the WTO that doesn't have a trade agreement with another country?
Once we leave, we will be able to strike deals all over the world.
Okay.
We'll be far better off.
Can I just say...
Can I just say this to you,
The
sir?
answer is there isn't a country.
Bear this in mind. Bear this in mind. The Eurozone is only 15% of the global economy. With Brexit, we've got the opportunity
Nigel, you
to
said you're going to answer the
re-engage
question.
with the
That
other
was my question.
85%.
Nigel, do you know the answer?
No.
No, I don't, because actually there isn't one. There isn't one. We can have whatever deals we want
Nigel,
outside
you're
the
sitting
EU.
here telling the members of the public, let's do that. But you don't even know how many countries have done it before us.
Because every country chooses their own way forward. We have got an opportunity here, sir, to try... Little countries like Switzerland have bigger free trade deals than the European Union does. Do you not think that we, as the 5th biggest country in the world, can't strike great trade deals with America, Australia, India...
Where are these trade deals? We've had 2 years.
Liam Fox has failed us, and I can agree with that.
So Anna, actually, just coming back to the original question, I mean, God forbid, but I'll just remind us where we are. Would a change of Prime Minister break the deadlock?
Of course, we do lots of trade deals as a member of the European Union, which give great benefit to our country.
Would change the Prime Minister break the deadlock?
I don't think it would break the deadlock. I think what worries me is that if Theresa May were to leave, and I think she is part of the problem, what really worries me is who might replace her. Because I fear Boris Johnson far more than I fear Theresa May. And I think that being really serious about this, we are in a political crisis. If we look at both main parties, we have a Prime Minister who doesn't have the support of her members of Parliament. And when we look at the Labour Party, we have Jeremy Corbyn, who is a Brexiteer, as we know, who doesn't have the support of his members of Parliament and now doesn't have the support of his supporters in the country who are saying that they want a people's vote and he's facilitating Brexit. It is quite extraordinary to find the Labour Party in cahoots, carving up a backroom deal with the Conservatives, with the government, to deliver Brexit. I think that's a real betrayal of Labour voters and indeed people across this country. We've got to get this back to the British people. The only way to sort this out.
John, I want to move on to another question. Briefly, are you betraying Labour voters?
Of course we're not. We could do with changing the Prime Minister, but the best way to do that would be a general election, because until you address some of the issues...
You've not managed to get that.
Well, until you address some of the issues that led to that vote, and I've got to say, Change UK have no policies and don't really want to change anything, so that's not the answer either. We need a general election to do it. If we can't have that, there is nothing wrong with trying to find a way through this, a reasonable way through this.
Do you really believe that Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister in your
I think he'd be the right way right now, yes.
I think this is the lack of honesty which is absolutely destroying politics in this country. You have to be honest about this. And I pay credit
sorry, are you saying Jonathan's lying?
No, I think he's being. I think he's doing his job.
No,
But I pay tribute to those Labour MPs who are putting their constituents first. And they are saying, whichever way you do Brexit, on the government's own assessments, it will make their constituents worse off. The best deal we've got is the current deal with the EU. But get it back to the British people and let them have a final say on Theresa May's deal. Why won't they? You know why you don't want it? Because they know that the British people have changed their minds.
You'd ignore it again, Anna, wouldn't you?
They'll vote to remain in the European Union.
You'd ignore it a second time, wouldn't you?
That's why they are not taking it back to the British people.
Vivian Wilkinson, where are you? Let's hear your question.
Should Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn be worried about the Brexit Party?
Well...
Well, lots of you are shouting yes. A lot of you aren't shouting anything. So I'm not sure what to make of that. I guess you think yes, Nigel. Obviously.
Well, the previous question actually links in neatly, doesn't it? Should Theresa May be replaced? And I wanted to answer that one by saying, as leader of the Brexit Party, I want Mrs May to stay in office for as long as possible, because she's doing a fantastic job recruiting for us. Look, I think the truth of it is, you know, the Brexit Party has appeared. It shouldn't have had to even be formed, because we should have left on the 29th of March. They were the promises made to us. The withdrawal agreement was dreadful, so we should have left on WTO terms and made our own way in the world and got on with the rest of our lives. We didn't, and I think, frankly...
So how worried should the other parties be? That's the question.
Well, clearly the Conservative Party are in crisis, and there are many... I mean, there was a lady at the back earlier on who said she was a Conservative Party member and she's going to vote for the Brexit Party. Sorry to say, when you get home, you might have received a phone call from the Tory party. You might not be a member anymore, but never mind.
Nigel, what's your prediction for the EU elections? What's your target? What are you aiming for?
Well, I'm trying to win, obviously.
No, but how many seats are you going for?
I've no idea. But I think that... Do I think the Brexit Party can win these European elections? Yes. Can it win big? Possibly. Possibly, yes. And I think the Tories are worried because their biggest supporters, their biggest donors are saying, what is this party for? But Labour's the fascination. You've heard it again tonight. The Labour position, basically, they want associate membership, half in, half out. But here's the problem that Labour have got. If you look at South Wales, look at the Midlands, look at the north of England, you see that nearly every single seat that had Labour hold was a Leave seat. There are 5 million people who voted Brexit and then voted for Jeremy Corbyn. And whatever clever game of ambiguity Team Corbyn try to play, the truth of it is the Labour Party is now a Remain party. Just look at their candidates in these European elections. They nearly all support a second referendum and Remain. And I think, actually, given the direction of the Labour Party, they too, now because they're betraying Brexit, cannot form a majority in this country. And the real answer is, what we now need is the two-party system to start to break up. They're serving nothing but themselves. We need a radical change in British politics, and I hope the Brexit Party can start that process. I really do.
I say to Nigel...
You need to be worried, don't you?
No, I say to Nigel, bring it on, because, yes, this is a heavily divided country. Nobody can deny that in this audience or any other audience. And if you only want to appeal to one side of that divide, whether the Brexit Party or Change UK, yeah, that's about as easy as it can get. But you're never going to move on past this unless you have a party that is willing to try and appeal to both sides, to try and move on. And I think if you look at the things that need to happen to address the reasonable level of resentment around that Brexit vote, that the way regions have been left behind, too much regional inequality, too much insecure, precarious work, you've got to have policies to address those things.
Yes, but the Brexit Party are not talking about those kind of policies, but nonetheless, they're getting rather a lot of traction and rather
of course they will. Because it's easy to have no answers and to just say things that aren't true.
We have an
get
answer.
A bit of media coverage.
We have an answer. Look, what we're saying is...
You don't have an answer. You've been
what is the point of your form of associate membership? We will not have a say. We will continue to have our laws and rules made somewhere else.
You have said that many times, Nigel.
What's the point of it?
Let the young woman there.
We are in a political crisis, and I've taken to using politicians' names instead of swearing. So you've got the Tories who have just goved up the country, you've got Labour who are just Borising about, and then you've got Farage and his cronies preying on the racism of people who are a bunch of Jeremy Hunt.
Oh, God. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
OK. We might be able to do just a bit better than that. The woman in red.
Well, I've sat here
raise the tone.
I've sat here all this time listening to you, and I want to cry because you're just bickering like children in a playground. Our country is in a terrible state. We've got less doctors than we've ever had. Children want medicines, they can't get them. You've made the law for medical cannabis. No prescriptions have gone through. The country is in a terrible state. When are you going to do something? Get on with real politics. Stop arguing about whether he's saying that and she's saying that. It's a mess. I can't believe it.
So I can... This is the core, and it's absolutely right to say this, that grown-up politics, which we are trying to deliver on in Parliament, is about not throwing your toys out of the pram, not running away from things, not leaving after the Brexit vote for 3 years and then just reappearing to invent a new party.
Because you said you were going to deliver it and you lied to us. That's why I'm back. You lied to us.
It's about making sure that we actually lean out and compromise with other MPs. Because the best thing that would happen if we actually deliver on this is that we could get on with the rest of the challenges in the country. It would settle the issue, we could have delivered on the referendum, and we can move on to everything else. It is occupying too much time, too much bandwidth, and I want us to get on as a government. We need to get on.
But the question originally was, how worried should you be about the Brexit Party?
Well, the Brexit Party is about
losing
one thing.
support. I mean, look at Anne Widdecombe, for example.
Yes. I looked at Anne Widdecombe, for example. Indeed.
And she speaks so highly of you, Amber.
Indeed, indeed. We're great friends. The Brexit Party is about one thing, just as UKIP Party was about one thing. And it is disappointing. Well, no, it is.
Democracy.
They have one thing.
Democracy. Well, What's wrong with that?
To every complex question, there is a simple, straightforward and wrong answer.
What, democracy is wrong, is it?
And you can rely... It is a complex...
Is it wrong? No, it's not complex.
Nigel, do not pretend.
Deliver on the referendum, Amber. Stop lying to people. Stop conning people. We want to leave. That's what we voted for.
No. This is exactly the sort of language that is designed to deceive people. You pretend these things are simple, Nigel, but you know they're not.
Let's just leave. That's easy, isn't it?
The reason why we are troubling over it, to find the right outcome...
You don't believe in it,
is
do you?
Because we believe we have to make sure that we look after the jobs and the economy.
Well, look, the question is...
But I'm with you, which is I long to get beyond it.
Wait a minute. Vivian's question was, should Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn be worried about the Brexit Party? And I want to come to you, obviously, the new party, Change UK. Incidentally, with the Brexit Party, of course, we don't entirely know how you're funded. We don't entirely know how you're...
You know how we're funded, absolutely.
Well, no, we absolutely declared through the Electoral Commission, I can assure you. Well, can I say something?
We don't know about it yet.
You know, one of the bleakest moments in our political history was when Nigel Farage stood in front of a poster with a long line of people behind it, which said breaking point in the EU referendum campaign. It was a bleak, dreadful moment because the people who were standing in that poster had got nothing to do with our membership of the European Union, because we're not in Schengen.
Yes, but Anna, you formed a new... Yeah, but this, in fairness, this is relatively ancient history. The question, this being question time, the idea is to answer the question. The question was, how worried should the parties be about the Brexit Party?
I worry. Well, the point I was trying to make...
Change UK started this new party. Would you like the kind of support he's getting?
Praised on prejudice because they were refugees.
They weren't refugees.
Fleeing from war and
They weren't refugees.
And
they weren't refugees.
And my fear about it all is that I don't want that man on May the 23rd to be seen as representing our country, because he doesn't. He does not speak for me, and I believe the majority of these people in this country, not in my name and not in your name. We do indeed need to move on to the big issues that the lady talks about. This wretched Brexit is gluing everything up. I have a solution. I understand a lot of people don't agree with it, but at least it would move us on to those big issues. And we need to shake up the political system that we have. The two main parties are broken. I left my political party, not for personal gain.
But one way of shaking up the system, Anna, would be to put up a candidate. I'm just interested, because obviously the Brexit Party are putting up a candidate at the Peterborough by-election. Change UK are not, as far as I'm aware.
I can tell you what happened. We went to look for an independent, a true independent candidate that could be supported by my political party, the Lib Dems and the Green Party. And we found somebody. He's a great person. He's been involved in the people's vote and he believes in Remain. And he was going to stand. And then 2 hours before the nominations were due to be delivered, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, he withdrew. And the reason that he withdrew was because he had had the most appalling pressure put on him by certain members of the Labour Party in the People's Vote campaign. And as a result of that, that young man withdrew. And with 2 hours to go, frankly, our priority in Change UK is to fight the EU elections.
The Lib Dems and the Greens have put someone up.
Yes, because the Lib Dems had already selected somebody and the Greens had already selected somebody. They were both prepared to stand down, both those candidates, to get behind this young man who is an independent, a genuine independent. He was going to stand and he had the most
Jonathan, what have you got to say about that?
Not by Jonathan.
No, I'm not suggesting of Jonathan personally, but you're making an allegation against Labour.
Really strange. I mean, elections are contests between different candidates and different people. So trying to somehow complain that the political parties are going to fight against each other, that's exactly what elections are. This is democracy. This
young man was going to stand as an independent, bringing together in these unusual political times 3 political parties who believe in a people's vote and Remain to get behind him in that Peterborough by-election, and he was stopped. He changed his mind because of the appalling pressure that was put on him by certain members of the Labour Party in the People's Vote campaign.
But Labour people will want a Labour candidate, surely. That's a reasonable position
they
to
do.
take.
They didn't want him to stand because they saw him as a threat to the Labour Party.
You sound very divided on the Remain side. Lots of different parties.
No,
Everyone
we all
arguing with
agreed
each other.
behind this young man.
You are, well, it doesn't sound like it. But you must have had a backup. Yeah, but given you're a professional political party,
again, darling. You're not
but you must be very professional. You must have had a backup plan, Anna, surely.
You're not listening.
Is the Remain side split or not?
No, we all agree on a people's vote and Remain.
Oh, right.
We all believe
Okay.
John, I want to come to you because you've not managed to get word in edgeways here.
Tell the audience how you're paid for it. £6,000, Anna Soubry.
I've not got
£2,000, Mr Reynolds.
What? What's he on?
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
You are paid to increase immigration. You're paid by a firm called More United. It's in your expenses for anybody to see.
No, I'm sorry, you're telling fibs, sir.
No.
I can assure you.
It's in your expenses, published by IPSA. You saying that's wrong?
Yes, I am absolutely saying that.
You declared it.
I had £6,000 donated to my election campaign. But they don't. And by the way, I think immigration's a good thing. It's been of considerable benefit to this country, and I'm proud that people come here. And I'm proud they call it their home.
John, I'm going to drag you back to the original question. Should Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn be worried about the Brexit Party?
I think they should be worried about the Brexit Party, and I think actually the Labour Party needs to be particularly worried about the... And I'll tell you why. And that is because I think the Labour Party is very vulnerable to a kind of nativist approach if the Brexit Party starts running general election campaigns and so on, I think it'll move towards. And I think that will be quite attractive to quite a large section of the Labour Party voters. And I think that one of the things the Labour Party desperately needs to do now is to make sure that it reconnects with those voters, that it sees off, in fact, the Brexit Party as a... I think the Brexit Party has a role to play on this European elections, but I think Nigel is going to have a tremendous problem in getting a platform together on a wide range of issues. And I think that the danger then is that what happens is that there is a bit of a seeping away of Labour support towards the Brexit Party, or whatever it's called when it starts running general elections, which in fact is sufficiently large to stop Labour getting back in. And I think in the Labour Party, one of the most important things for us to do is to see off that challenge and to make sure it doesn't happen. Because if it does, then it's going to be really, really tough to get a Labour Party government back in power.
Well, of course, that's an important part of it, John, but we also have a problem on the other side. There are clearly people appealing to all sides of that support of that Labour coalition. Now, we've got to find a way to bring them together. We can't just say it's one or the other. And I think you do that by addressing the real issues, because it is a fact to say the Brexit Party or Change UK don't have any policies, and you cannot address the real problems this country has, real genuine problems, unless you've got some proper policies.
Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about some of those real issues. We've got a question on that from Stephen Wood.
Recent figures showed the first sustained fall in GP numbers for 50 years. How can this be reversed?
So, this is analysis by the Nuffield Trust, which is suggesting that the number of GPs working at NHS has fallen for the 4th consecutive year. Number of GPs per 100,000 people has fallen from nearly 65 in 2014 to 60 last year. And incidentally, here in Northampton, it's down to 55 GPs. It's not a record to be proud of, is it, Amber?
So the answer to the question is there's two things we're doing. One is that we're aware of the need to train more doctors. There's 1,000 more training places going into place this year. There's more doctors in place than there were 2010, but we need to do better than that. But the other thing is we need to work with the British Medical Authority to make sure that we have a different type of work pattern for GPs. The way people have their working now, they don't want necessarily the old way of GPs operating. They want a different setup. They want to get more skills. So it's a question of making sure that we train more and that we have a different working practice. And in order to support that, the government's put another £20 billion into the NHS to make sure that it has sufficient funding, which is the largest contribution to the NHS since its inception. So we are committed to making sure.
Point?
Well, it's true. We need to continually make sure we do get more people to train in it, both doctors and nurses.
Though, isn't it?
Well, it isn't too late. We can put it right now. We've put in place the training for starting this year. Jeremy Hunt put in place some training for nurses so that care workers could train up without having to leave to become nurses. We've been aware that we need to have more and more trained professionals in the area, and we're stepping up to deliver that.
Isn't the problem that we've had far too little training for far too long of both doctors and nurses?
Yes.
We've been turning away nurses and doctors from training, and this has gone on for year after year after year, and this has led to the crisis we've now got. I agree that we should do something now to try and put it back, but the gap is now so large because this training gap has been so substantial. We've got a huge gap to overcome. And I must say, I do think for the UK to go around trawling through places like Ghana and Nigeria to get nurses to this country is really a scandal, a result of the fact we just haven't done our own training program.
Nigel, have you got a policy on this?
Well, I did have in a previous party, but I tell you what I do want to do is make this point.
I want you to answer the question.
Well, at the moment, we're 4 weeks old. We arrived 4 weeks ago.
So no.
We are
because
fighting.
you're saying you want to stand for
the
a
answer
general
is,
election.
when we field our 650 general election candidates, the answer will be yes. And in Peterborough, which we're standing in, you will also see some policies there too. But I'm not going to confuse the 23rd of May, which is about democracy and whether it's being delivered to the people of our country.
This question is nothing to do with that. This question is about
I know, but why do you ask me a different
numbers.
one then? Here's my view. Here's my view. My view is...
Well, that's a novel approach.
My view is... I always do that.
Move on to somebody who's got an answer.
Yeah, well, maybe I should actually...
No. Well, actually, often people within political parties have different points of view. You proved that, Anna, for many, many years.
Nothing wrong
with that.
It's called democracy now.
The lack of investment in science, technology, engineering and medicine in this country has been a complete and utter disaster. We're relying, in many cases, with doctors on up to between 30 and 40% of doctors coming in from overseas. I'm with John. We often take people from countries who need doctors and nurses more than we do.
Just make these
we need a complete...
You just make...
Do you know, whenever I've contested figures with you on this programme, I've always been right and you've always been wrong. So stick with it. Stick with it.
Okay.
All right? Why don't we change the whole university tuition fees set up and encourage people to go into jobs like this, and why don't we train our own nurses, doctors, engineers? That's the future for this country. I'm a great believer in it.
The woman in the red coat.
Thank you, Amber. You said about the training gap for doctors and consultants and specialists. So medical cannabis was legalised in November and there's not one NHS prescription been issued in the country. Parents are going illegally to other countries to bring it back in to save the lives of their children. That's a training gap and it's funding in the NHS. What's your opinion of how we can try and get one NHS prescription since November?
So, reasonably briefly, because I need to get around the panel and some people in the audience.
So there have been some changes, as you know. The Home Secretary made that change, and the particular case that he was focused on did get the additional medicinal cabinets that they needed. But I will look into it when I get back. I think
within 6 months.
No, but there have been some people who have been assisted. But I think that's because But also there's been he set up a panel so that it could go through it. But you obviously have a lot of expertise on it. You've got my name. Why don't you write to me about it, and I'll take it personally to the Home Secretary.
Thank you very much.
It's a great way to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Just come on the programme and then you can write to her after. The woman there with the glasses.
The panel keeps talking about democracy, but I want to know how you're going to restore our faith in it.
Well, I also want you to answer the question about GPs, actually, Jonathan, which is what's Labour policy reversing the fall in GPs?
Yeah, well, we address and get that faith back by addressing people's concerns, and it is around things like the NHS that people are really quite rightly concerned, because this government has not been a good custodian of the NHS. Don't fall for the spin. This government compares badly on funding the NHS to previous Conservative governments, let alone
how would you
previous
reverse the
Labour.
trend?
You have to put the money in, because if you don't, not only do you not have enough people, the people you have left are tremendously overworked, they're overstressed, they want to leave. A lot of GPs, they don't want the life anymore of a GP because they're having to do so much work. And we've got to be honest and address that. There's no easy way to address waiting times, A&E waiting times, the lack of GPs, unless you're willing to fund them. But you've got to remember that the NHS is the most cost-effective way of providing healthcare, far more efficient than a private health insurance system someone like Nigel might put in his manifesto. The NHS is worth fighting for, but it's worth putting the money into, and that's what we will do.
I mean, one of the 11 MPs in Change UK, of course, is Dr Sarah Wollaston, who used to be a GP before she got elected in 2010. And there's some truth in what we've heard, that we don't recruit enough. I don't have a problem with people coming to work in our country, as you know, from overseas. And some of the best nurses that we learn from, actually, are nurses from South India, from Kerala in particular. And, of course, we are absolutely and rightly reliant on a huge number of EU nationals that come and work in our NHS, and they call this place their home. And I'm very proud of them. But we do need to recruit more, but we also need to make sure that for GPs, that their working conditions are hugely improved. We also need, I think, to pay them more. I think there's a real issue about that. And one of the things which I think we made a big mistake when I was in government, and I was critical of it at the time, was that at a time when we should be encouraging people to take more care of their own health, more responsibility, but use the NHS more wisely, like going to your pharmacy instead of going straight to your GP. Unfortunately, changes have been made in pharmacies which have not done the right thing by pharmacists, and that would all be part of making sure that for GPs, it's a great job. They used to think it was a great job. They wanted to do it. So some of this is about recruitment, some of it is about conditions, and some of it is about making sure our pharmacies are much better funded.
The man in the check jacket.
How long does it take to train a doctor? 5 years, 6 years, 7 years?
7 years.
7 years. So if we wanted to train them now, we won't get more doctors for 7 years.
Yeah.
There's something in Wellingborough, it's at Queensway doctors there. They were queuing up 16 deep this morning, I think, and it was raining. They just couldn't get in. And when they did get in, they couldn't get an appointment. Yeah. So they had to get there at 8 o'clock and queue up, and they couldn't get an appointment. It's no good ringing. Not enough doctors there.
Young woman at the back.
Yeah, as a local GP, what I would like to say actually is I think the problem is recruitment is one issue, but actually the bigger problem is retention. You have people who are qualifying in this country who spend years in medical school who leave. And unless you address that, actually, you can train all the doctors you like, but the problem is you're not going to keep them. And our young people, our young doctors, are going all over. They're going to New Zealand, they're going to Canada, they're not staying here. And as a GP and a doctor in the NHS for 22 years, and as an Italian, I've never known morale to be so low throughout the NHS. And I think the difficulty with Brexit for me, apart from the obvious, is actually that it's taken the eye off the ball of serious problems. I'm a GP who works 5 minutes away. We have patients who wait far longer than I would like them to. I provide a service which I probably say is safe, but not particularly good, because I don't have the time to spend that I would like to spend with
them. I can hear from your voice that upsets you.
And actually, I think, you know, amongst all this sort of bickering and arguing, there are real problems here. And unless somebody does something about them, I think you're going to find that the emotions that people have are going to get much worse. So I would say to
The general public want access to GPs 7 days a week, but the GPs, obviously, weekend work doesn't, their terms and conditions is not very favourable to them.
Can I just say
I mean, some GPs do work 7 days a week at the moment.
This point that the GP at the back
6 days a week, forgive me.
mentions, she's absolutely right. There is a very serious problem that we have with this tapering of the allowance, which means that there are a large number of doctors now in our NHS who find themselves actually in a position where the more they work, they actually get penalised financially, and it's wrong, and it has to change. It's a very serious problem that the government has got to look at.
This is the pension contribution
Yeah.
issue, but
And
I think
it's
the lady there was
tapering
talking
of the
about wider issues.
No, it's also to do with pensions as well. Sorry, Amber.
But there's also a big problem about
but the
what
wider
percentage
issue
of
is
our...
actually the
Hang on,
retention.
sorry, we couldn't hear you.
It's actually the retention of people because they're so unhappy about what they're having to do in the conditions they're having to work in. They don't want to stay and
Amber,
practice in that
how
situation.
have you let it come to
No,
this?
well,
I mean, when you
it's a very-
hear her speak like that...
Well, as I said earlier, there is more money going into the NHS. There is a reforming plan that Matt Hancock is putting in place about workplace processes. And this year he's going to be launching, I think quite soon, a new recruitment and retention programme for the NHS. So we're aware of the challenges. And also, we know that the demands on the NHS are going up and up all the time as we have longer lives. But I am taking very much to heart what you've said, and what the lady here at the front said, is that, of course, Brexit is important, but we must not let it get in the way of the very important responsibilities we have to improve people's lives, and to do it not just by putting more money in, but making sure we do reforms at the same time.
Thank you very much for your contribution, incidentally. Our hour is up, I'm afraid. Our next programme... Oh, is that what you're saying? Oh, that's nice to hear. Our next programme is on the 16th of May in Elgin, and the following week we are in Frome. So call 0330 123 9988 if you'd like to be in the audience, or you can go to the Question Time website, you can follow the instructions there. And if you want to have your say on tonight's topics, you can join Adrian Charles and guests on Question Time Extra Time. That is on 5 Live now. It's always pretty lively. But for now, thank you very much to my panel, to all of you here. Thank you for joining in, and of course to you for watching. From Northampton, bye-bye.
With unprecedented access to the EU side throughout the entire Brexit negotiation, Brexit Behind Closed Doors, a two-part Storyville, is on BBC iPlayer. And who would be a politician? Beyond Today looks at the recent local elections and other big stories on the BBC Sounds app.